What's up guys, Agent here again with another PTS patch notes video. This time we're going to be talking about the Templars. So again, I did decide to break up this particular patch notes because it was so large based on class and then Elsweyr changes and then base game changes. So it just helps to kind of put this into more digestible chunks here, and it also allows you to kind of specifically take a look at any changes that are specific to your class that you might be interested in taking a look at. So I do have links in the description below to the other PTS patch notes videos for the other classes, as well as the Elsweyr and base game changes. So if you are interested in those, please go ahead and check those out. But we're going to go ahead and get started here with the Templar changes. So, under the Adric Spear line, the Burning Light passive, they fixed an issue where the damage from this passive was able to be dodged, despite the fact that the damage tethered to an attack that could already be blocked or dodged. So they just basically made it so you can't dodge it anymore. More of a PvP stuff, not so much for PvE. Focused Charge reduced the damage dealt by this ability, and the Toppling Charge morphed by approximately 8% to put it on par with other gap closure abilities. Explosive Charge, they increase the damage dealt from this morph by approximately 15% to put it on par with their AoE ability standards, and this morph converts the attack into an AoE. And Toppling Charge, they fixed an issue where this ability and Explosive Charge morph could not be CC broken until the stagger is completed if you were interrupted by the ability. This ability and its morphs will now always apply off balance to the target rather than requiring them to be interrupted, since targets were automatically set off balance if interrupted anyway. So this is going to be a change for PvP because this move is not used in PvE at all. So it just seems like it's going to be a bit of a nerf to Toppling Charge. I'm not sure which morph you normally use in PvP, so this is kind of going beyond my area of expertise. So I'm going to leave that to a commenter who might know more about Templar PvP than I do. Piercing Javelin, they increase the duration of the stun granted from this ability and its morph to land on a beautiful whole number. This means the base ability and Aurora Javelin will now stun for 2 seconds rather than 1.8, while Binding will last for 4 seconds rather than 3.5. For Aurora Javelin, they fixed an issue where you couldn't hit the damage bonus cap without utilizing range increasing passives. Now it will get 2% stronger for every 1 meter between you and the target, up to 40% at 20 meters. So this is a general buff because the stun does last for a longer period of time. Again, not really a PvE issue because we don't use it in PvE. It's going to be more for PvP. Puncturing Strikes reduce the channel time for this ability and it's more from 1 second to 1 second from 1.1 seconds. So it's a little bit easier to weave now. The drop of the 0.1 seconds actually kind of makes a little bit of a difference if you're using it as a spam buff. So mostly for Stamplars, because Magplars, generally speaking, do not use channeled sweeps, channeled strikes. So bit of a buff here for Stamplars, not that big, but it is going to be probably a little bit noticeable. Radial Sweep, which is the ultimate, they increase the radius of this ability and its morphs to 8 meters from 6 meters. And then Empowering Sweep, they redesigned this morph to offer damage rather than survivability. The damage pulse from the initial hit now lasts 6 seconds at base, but is increased by 2 seconds for each enemy hit, up to a maximum of 6 enemies. It also now grants Empower for the duration rather than major protection. So I believe this is the Stamina morph. Yeah, I believe this is the Stam morph here. So now it basically allows both Stamplars and Magplars to use a morph that helps boost damage overall. Spear Shards, they increase the initial hit from this ability and its morph by approximately 36%. They increase the dot of this ability and Luminous Shard morph by 5%. And they adjusted how these abilities power up as they increase in rank. Spear Shards, they increase the damage dealt by the entire ability as it ranks up. Luminous Shard no longer increases damage as it ranks up, but instead gains cost reduction, so minus 90 magicka per rank. And Blazing Spear, it increases damage dealt by the entire ability as it ranks up. So this is definitely a buff to Spear Shards for PvE. Sun Shield, they updated the tooltip for this ability and its morphs to state the actual value rather than an ambiguous value that required you to do some super hard math. So it used to just say like a percentage. It's based on the percentage of health, so now it's just going to give you the actual value of the shield. It increased the initial hit of this ability and the Radiant Ward morph by 150% to put it on par with our AoE standards. Blazing Shield's damage remains untouched because it is already above that standard, since it has an additional requirement in order to gain the damage. The Radiant Ward morph no longer gains additional cost reduction as it ranks up. Instead, the bonus shield size per enemy's hit goes up to 9% per enemy hit at rank 4. This is generally going to be a buff overall to Sun Shield because you are able to deal a little bit more damage this way. Plus, if you're using Radiant Ward, you do get a little bit of a larger shield rather than a cost reduction. So it'll cost more to use, but you'll get a bigger shield out of it. Under the Dawn's Wrath skill tree, Eclipse will no longer proc off direct damage attacks such as spiked armor or those of the Harbinger's damage return. He updated the tooltip to properly indicate their internal cooldown, which has already been there. They reduced the damage dealt by the Thorn mechanic, the damage return of this mechanic, and its morphs by 25%. This only pertains to the damage, the heal of Total Dark, and the explosion of Unstable Core remains untouched. Power of the Light, they adjusted the ability rank up for this morph so it no longer gains damage on initial hit, but instead increases the duration of Minor Fracture and Breach applied, since that is the focus of the morph. This will result in approximately a 3% damage loss on the initial hit, but the duration of Minor Fracture and Breach will last 9 seconds, up from 6 seconds at their final rank. So this just makes it a little bit easier for Templar healers to maintain this Minor Fracture, Minor Breach. It's not really going to change Templar rotations because you still want to use it on 6 seconds, basically the duration of Power of the Light, in order to get as many of those additional damage procs as you can. So more of a buff for PvE healers, a little bit of a change for Templars, but it's not really going to change anything because you still want to get that 6-second rotation out for the Power of the Light. Solar Flare, they reduced the cast time for this ability and the Dark Flare morph to 1 second. They increased the travel speed to match other projectiles. They reduced the damage by approximately 37% to make up for the fact that it can be cast more frequently, and they reduced the base cost to 2970 magic cut from 3240. Solar Barrage, they removed the delay of this ability, which resulted in gaining 1 extra tick of damage. They also fixed an issue where this ability was being considered a direct damage attack rather than a damage over time attack. So for PvE, Magplar's Solar Barrage was the morph that you initially used, so this is going to be a slight buff because of that reduction in the base cost, so you do have a little bit better sustain now. You also get 1 extra tick of damage, but it does seem like it is going to do the same amount of damage, so the overall DPS should not change due to this change. This is more of a sustained buff to Magplar's. Sunfire, they adjusted the ability and its morph to follow their standardized damage over time rule set. Total duration has been increased to 8 seconds from 6.25 seconds, and they increased the damage per tick by 31% to make up for the loss of the first tick, to result in roughly the same overall DPS, but with less burst damage. The Vamp Bane morph will now last 12 seconds instead of 10.25 seconds. In Reflective Life morph, the spread of how far this ability will attempt to find targets near your initial target is now 5 meters instead of 4.5 meters. So again, kind of a wash overall. The standardization of the dot tick does mean you can have to change your rotation a little bit here. Now, the thing with Magplars is you already are kind of running a quasi-dynamic rotation already because of the varying uptimes, so this isn't going to change all too much. So the 8-second duration on Sunfire is now the same exact duration as Blazing Spear, so you are going to have to play around a little bit with your rotation. And if you're using Vamp Bane, that's 12 seconds now, so again, a little bit of a rotation change, but overall DPS should stay about the same. This is also going to be a slight sustain buff as well, because now you don't have to cast it quite as often, so you will be able to use less magicka overall. So overall, a sustain buff. Under the Restoring Life skill tree, Breath of Life, they fixed an issue where the secondary heal granted from this ability was able to ignore the caster's line of sight and target players behind them. So you will now have to have both targets be directly in front of you in order to get that Breath of Life active. Secondary heal. Cleansing Ritual, the ability and its morph will now grant healing and or damage based on the user's highest offensive stat rather than just max magicka and spell damage. Ritual of Retribution, they fix an issue where the damage from this morph could not critically hit. So this is not going to change too much for basically any Templars. You could potentially see this being used on Stamplars now in PvP. I think they already used it in PvP for the cleanse, but now it actually deals a respectable amount of damage and healing too. So a bit of a buff for Stamplars in PvP. Practice Incantation to fix an issue where this ability was increasing the heal by 1 per rank rather than 1.1%. So just a bug fix there. So overall, it does seem from a PvE perspective, Magplar saw a nice buff in sustain department between the reduction in cost of Solar Barrage as well as the increased duration of Sunfire. This basically allows you to use less cast of Sunfire, which ends up being more magicka saved. Blazing Spear also saw a buff, so Magplars did end up getting a buff overall compared to previous patch. Stamplars are more or less around the same place. They got slight buffs with the reduction in duration of the channel for jabs, but overall it's going to be about the same DPS. You might see a little bit of a DPS increase overall, but it doesn't seem to be that much of a change. They also got a new ultimate, so they can use empowering sweeps rather than ballista now. And they could have used empowering sweeps before, but now it's just going to be even stronger. So Templars did get a buff, Magpies got an even bigger buff, so Templars definitely got some love on this patch. So that is it for this video. Hope you guys found this informative. Again, links in the description below to the other PTS patch notes videos, as well as the link to the actual patch notes on the forum, so you guys can see the full patch notes and read them at your own pace. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.